All right, this is the Lake Charles team coming at you live and direct from Tucson, Arizona. And wow, it's not even been a week, has it, since we got back? Or wait, no, it's about
a week and about an hour.
In about an hour, we got back from Lake Charles, Louisiana. And so, yeah, we want to talk to you all about what happened there. And so the brief explanation is that Lake Charles was hit by Hurricane Laura, and John Simon here has family from Lake Charles and still there and has a close connection. So we decided to assemble a team to go, and we assembled it very fast and we drove very far. And that's what happened. And we want to tell you about it. So
just to say, I know that everyone's like little formation on Zoom is different, but mine I think is perfect because it's like the Voltron of this group, because mine has me and Andy at the top, but I think it's like Voltron upside down. So if me and Andy are at the top, we're like the legs, we're driving a lot. We're determining where we're going. And then the middle row is Abby and Derek, and they're the arms. They're just strength and power. They're just carrying giant like cases of water bottles. They're punching people, like not necessarily. And then at the bottom, we have the head, who is Tabitha. She's just the wisdom. She's the focus. She's the mentality. She's like, Andy, maybe we don't drive in one go on the way back. Andy, maybe we do stop at this delicious restaurant, or we get some pecans and get a pie. Like, it's just the focus, the direction. So I think it's just a perfect team. This was the best Voltron I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, let's start with that. The team. I agree with that. John and I, on our way home, we just said, we had the best team for this situation. And so he's kind of described some of that. What about you all? I mean, some of you'd met on this trip, right? Basically. But tell me about what was it like to, what kind of team did we have here really quick?
I mean, most of y'all know I've probably been in mission for less than a year, and I'm usually probably the youngest, I would say, of the group besides kids. For this trip. So for this trip, it was just a really wonderful opportunity to just meet more of the church I go to. And like, I've seen Tabitha here and there, and Corbin's like, you got to get to know her. I'm like, okay, I will do when I have time. And I just met Derek on this trip, and I found out he's an amazing cook and makes great food and eggs. And I got to learn more about John, which I thought you were just kind of like this standoff, like don't really talk to anyone, but you're actually super social. And so that's cool. And then I know a lot about Andy, but I got to learn more about Andy and have good conversations. So for me, it really helped me fit more in the church and feel more like this was a home.
Yeah. How about you, Tabitha? Reflections on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I thought what a blessing that we got to celebrate 2 days. Out of 5 people, we got to celebrate 2 people's birthday on one 5-day trip. I mean, that was amazing. I mean, you can know someone for a year sporadically, but if you spend every hour of every day with somebody for 5 days straight, you know them better than some people you've known for 5 years just in passing. Like it's a very intense way of getting to know people, and it was great.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Derek, you were kind of the guy who like maybe had the least I mean, you and I have known each other in a way for a long time, but what was it like for you to take a trip with this group from the church?
Oh, I absolutely enjoyed it. I thought the spontaneity of it was thrilling, and then having a good group of people to talk with is great. Just a great time.
Yeah.
I definitely like Tabitha's story with her, because, just a small world of people in Tucson, people knowing each other. And then she was in the Navy and I was in the Marines. And then hearing Abby's story of going to college and doing university research on ants, entomology, I was like blown away
that not right?
Flies.
Oh, flies. Yeah, close. Insects. Yeah, that's really neat. And that sort of thing wouldn't happen if it wasn't for this trip.
Yeah. And I think Abby did bring home some beetles, if I heard correctly. Yeah.
They died.
Oh,
Yeah.
sad.
You didn't have to say that, Abby.
I'm sorry.
We were at a good place with the, oh, it's so sweet. Abby took beetles home. Like, we didn't have to actually say what.
They're in beetle heaven.
Yeah.
So, John, why don't you give us the brief background on your family in Lake Charles?
Sure.
That helps explain. Actually, let me say one thing and then go into that. I or I guess two Tuesdays ago, I heard somebody on the radio talking about the hurricane in Lake Charles, and it was just on in the background. And then I thought, oh shoot, that's where John was last year. And I thought that's where his family's from. And I brought it up at our team meeting and said, John, did something bad happen in Lake Charles? I heard about this hurricane. And so that's how this whole thing came about. But John, talk about your family's history there briefly. And place.
So my dad's family's from the South, specifically Louisiana. My dad and his relatives have been a little bit like spread out to like that southwestern region of Lake Charles. Like my dad was born in Lafayette. I have a sister living in DeRidder, which is a little north. But like the concentrated like experience of my dad and his family was almost exclusively Lake Charles. And so like he was raised there. My dad has 6 siblings. My dad joined the Air Force when he was a young man, and he moved out. Basically all of my relatives have experienced Lake Charles to an extent, whether it's like, for me, I'm much more on the outside. Like I only kind of experienced Lake Charles through like family reunions, celebrations, funerals. But a lot of my cousins would, even if they didn't grow up in Lake Charles, they would spend summers in Lake Charles. A lot of my relatives did grow up in Lake Charles. And so like, it's just like this weird kind of like very special place where we just go for things. You know, I was in Lake Charles a couple of years ago when my uncle Jason passed away. We had almost an impromptu family reunion last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, when my grandmother passed away. And so it's just this place of like it's so intertwined with my family. Like I've never experienced a place where it's like this place almost exists as this like it was a surreal experience for me driving through and around Lake Charles, when it's like, wow, like my relatives aren't here right now. Like I'm not here with my dad. Like it was a really weird experience like that. Yeah, so when Andy just briefly thought of the idea of like, what could we do? I was like, I know people. Like I know a lot of people in Lake Charles. I have a few cousins who live out there. My Aunt Sherry lives out there, and then I have I know Aunt Sherry's pastor also. So I reached out to him, and that's kind of where the ball got rolling from there. And it was really just an idea of like seeing what their needs were, and then seeing what was practical on our end for response. Like, was this just let's just do a bake sale and throw a couple $100 their way, or could we do something a little bit more involved? And that's kind of how the team came to be. So yeah.
The specific thing that the pastor, Reverend Owens, mentioned was that they were still in a state of needing to boil water, and so that they really needed bottled beverages. And so that's something that we heard, and we kind of just focused in on that idea. And we thought, well, if we could just get a lot of bottled beverages there and then check in on kind of this family pastor and some family members, that'd probably be a good start. And a cool thing that happened is we reached out to, I actually reached out to a guy I work with in kind of denominational world who's in Houston. Actually didn't hear back from him, but I heard back from another pastor in Houston through another connection about a day later. And we had a church that ended up really purchasing a lot of beverages. I mean, I think I heard we ended up taking 5 tons of beverages, mostly beverages and a few toiletries and such. But it was a really cool connection that happened with this church, New Life in Houston. That was pretty sweet. And another really awesome thing that happened on the way up is Sarah Brown from our church reached out about the fact that her family home was available to stay in. She didn't even know we were actually going yet. She just thought she was talking about the future. And then this family home, Houston's massive, and this family home was like within 5-10 minutes from the church we were picking stuff up from, which was incredible. So, and it was a beautiful home. So thank you to the Andrews family and Sarah for making that connect for us. So we had a great place to stay. We picked up stuff from the church. We couldn't get nearly all of it into our trucks. We had to do a U-Haul the next day. We drove to Lake Charles. I want to hear from each of you. What was the biggest impression of the damage that happened in Lake Charles when we drove in? And let's start with Derek on that. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I've never seen something like this before in my life. Signs completely torn over, cars pulled off, debris everywhere, fallen trees. It must have been really rough the first couple weeks. We got there a couple weeks later, and it was just still in shambles.
Yeah. Abby, what about you?
Same with Derek. I've never seen hurricane disaster. I mean, the closest thing I've seen to something that's like an everyday place being a disaster was like when the Safeway in Glendale caught on fire, and even that was like 10% compared to what Lake Charles was. Just so many houses and homes and businesses and shambles, and you can't even tell what like it used to be. And I mean, I can imagine the hurt from people that live there. Like, that used to be where I used to get my groceries, or that was like the gas station where I would talk to like my neighbor while we're filling up, or like that was my home. Like, you and Derek told me and Tabitha that you saw a house that a tree like has completely covered and fallen over, and I can imagine what that would be like looking at your home and seeing it just being unrepairable and facing all of the stress of the future. Like, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to get resources? How are we going to get this to be our home again? I think that was the biggest thing, was just the reality of it and actually seeing it.
Are you, Tabitha?
The only thing I compare it to is like being in the aftermath of like a war. Like, I mean, the weather was so intense, it had effects on buildings like a bomb would have. And I just have never seen weather be so destructive. And you can imagine just the shock. You know, if it's shocking to me and I don't have a personal relationship with these buildings, you can imagine what it's like to live there and see that destruction.
Yeah, John, so having been there throughout your life, what was that like for you to see?
Yeah, I've kind of processed this a little bit, and I don't think that, I think the fact that a lot of my relatives' homes were spared was a big blessing, because I didn't feel this big emotional punch. I think that what actually hit me the most, so we got there late Saturday evening, or I guess early Sunday morning. It was like 2 a.m. And then we stayed at New Church service. I think the most emotionally gripped I felt throughout the whole experience was actually just hearing the church in Houston talk about how they had experienced Hurricane Harvey 3 years ago, and just realizing that all of these cities and towns that live along the coast in southeastern America, this is a reality that they live with, where they're just like, every year it's really just a roll of the dice, and just hoping that these places we love don't get completely demolished. And that was just really, really I don't know, kind of humbling for me to be like, wow, this is just how they live. Like we just hot. It's just really hot for us, you know. Our streets crack open and we have awful potholes. But for them, it's like, no, we got to make sure our insurance is in a good place, and we got to make sure we're prepared because we might have to evacuate for a month. And so that whole reality is just is surreal to me almost. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap my mind around dealing with that kind of tragedy on a regular basis like those folks do. I think I also haven't experienced hurricane damage, but I was just shocked that when we were about 20 miles out of town, we started to see things like the huge wind-rated, billboard signs that a lot of them were blown out. That didn't surprise me, but some of them looked to me like somebody had taken them, crumpled them up, twisted them, and threw them on the ground. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my gosh, right? So then we got into town, the damage was just really extensive. And as it is with wind damage, some homes were spared, kind of like John's families generally were. Others were just pieces, or had the big 100-year-old tree fall on them. And key thing to know is that Lake Charles doesn't get direct hit by hurricanes regularly. And so, and I'm guessing not in the last century, because some of these trees were so old that, I mean, they're big pine trees. These aren't the things you expect to be growing in the areas where a hurricane would hit. And they went over very easily, it looks like, because this isn't typical weather. This hurricane took a strange turn and hit Lake Charles at, with 154 mile an hour winds. And Lake Charles hasn't been rebuilt before. It hasn't necessarily been like hurricane specifications because it's not usually in the direct path. And this time it was. So the level of damage that wind did is pretty exceptional. They didn't have the storm surge problem that you're used to seeing in relation to hurricanes. There wasn't like the flooding. It was all wind, but very, very severe. Kind of what you might be more used to seeing in tornado areas. But yeah, it was just really, really destructive. I think one of the most, we had a good time on the trip. We did learn a lot about each other, but of course you're there seeing a devastated community, and that's not fun. But there were some really, really incredible things we just saw that, John and I reflected on our way home and said, there was evident God at work stuff happening in this trip. That I can't say I just drive around feeling that convinced of on a regular basis, but on this trip I went, man, the way things came together, I can't attribute this to anything but God. How well, did any of you see stuff like that? And tell me a story or tell me about one of those things. Any of you, all of you. Let's start with Tabitha.
Well, just at the beginning, when you broached the subject with me, like during our small group Wednesday night, and you were like, hey, we need a truck. And then you texted me later and like, hey, are you on board? And I said, yes. And then I got cold feet and I was like, no, I'm out. And Andy's like, what do you need? I'm like, well, I'm worried about my truck. And so Andy and I had actually planned to go coffee Friday, and we just kind of worked in, like, my truck would go see his mechanic. We'd have coffee, pick it up after it was done. Got to spend some time with Andy and Abby. And so just detail like that, working out just like me about my truck, and like God kind of providing a way for me to be comfortable because Andy was available to kind of make sure my truck was in the condition to go.
Yeah. That was very, like, and even that the mechanic was like, sure, I can squeeze it in, right? And the timing of that was so good. Yeah. How about you, John? How about any things that stuck out like that?
Man, like just too many coincidences to be called coincidence, coincidences.
These.
Coincidences. Like, Sarah Brown has parents who have a house that is fully available, has plenty of space for us, and it's 5 minutes from the church we have to go to. And then when we're headed back, we stay at my uncle's place and we forget a dolly to give back to the church. And we find out that there's a church plant that works with the other church that's 5 minutes away. We go to deliver the dolly, and it's this super cool pastor who's got 75% nurses in his congregation, and they're like, we want to send out a medical team to help out. Completely ridiculous that this happened. Would not have happened if we hadn't forgot the stupid dolly, which is hilarious, because one of the last things they told us from New Life when they sent us out to Lake Charles is, please don't forget our dolly. But if we hadn't, then we wouldn't have made this connection. I mean, Andy's flatbed trailer got hit by a truck that was trying to merge back into our lane when we were stuck in bumper to bumper traffic. A 1/4 inch of damage, like literally
little tiny chip. Yeah,
like just so much, like. And we probably drove, I think me, Derek, and Abby, we added up the hours very conservatively that we were driving. It was something like 42 hours for the whole trip. And we were safe. Yeah. We didn't, like, there were no issues, like all of that. So, like, wonderful. So yeah, I think it was awesome. I'm very grateful that God was very good to us.
And speaking of that driving thing, we had Rod, our friend here in Tucson, who looks very much like Gandalf. And I imagined him in like Gandalf's tower, or one of those, towers in the Lord of the Rings, Sauron's tower or whatever it was, but we get this text from him, and he's like, the Spirit prompted me to pray for you, drive safe. And John and I were like, oh, like, what does this mean? But we did, we were all safe. And I just imagined him in Tucson, waking up in the middle of the night, sitting in his prayer hot tub, which he does, and just like going like, and like, Jesus, protect them, and I don't know what that did, but hey, we're safe. And so that was a pretty cool. And even the fact that he was willing to pray at a late hour and, let us know. It's pretty.
We got a lot of, like, I got a ton of text messages from people from our church. And I mean, like, I told Andy this, like, there's a dude within our denomination who I'm having like bi-weekly meetings with to help, organize some stuff for a conference next year. He sent me an email and was like, I saw this on Facebook. We're going to be praying for you guys. Like, let us know what you need. And then people from the church and from outside of the church, and people, I have an old friend who's just been kind of poking his head around at church lately. He reached out to me, just people being like, hey, we love what you're doing. We're praying for you. Let us know if you need anything. Like, that was just beautiful, just to feel remembered as we're doing something like this,
Absolutely. Derek, how about you? Anything that
I was thinking of a time filling up the tire pressure on the trailer. It was like 10 psi, and you're like, oh, fill up the tire pressure. I was like, that's a good idea, because they were really low, and putting on all that weight would have just collapsed.
Oh man!
So smart thinking there. I also like the time spending with John's uncle.
Yeah.
So unique, so special. He just took us in with hospitality and open arms, and what a time. I mean, we really got to hear some of his life story and just feel like we knew this guy, and maybe we left with something to go back to. So we really left a good door open for some connection.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. That was a really cool time. John, why don't you just briefly talk about what that was like?
I feel like my uncle's turning into this like sort of mission celebrity lately, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so where we stayed the first 2 nights, as well as where the church was that we were getting all of our supplies from, that was up in northern Houston. My uncle lives in Pearland, which is southern Houston. And so he's been there forever. Just a really cool guy. My uncle's got a really, really crazy but encouraging story of his life and how he's overcome a variety of vices and demons, and how, he's not a believer, but he talks about how he's found a lot of liberation through all these like spiritual practices, and he's very, very involved in the various anonymous organizations that work with people who have gone through his same vices, and he's really into community and mentorship and supporting people through their worst times, and he just loves hosting. He loves entertaining. And I think one of my favorite moments throughout our entire trip was my uncle's a big cigar fan. And so he's just talking up how much he loves cigars. And so he's like, well, if you guys will excuse me, I have a meeting that I have to go to. So he goes in his garage, boots up Zoom. He's lighting a cigar. I leave to grab some bags from the truck. As I'm coming back, Derek has already sat down and is partaking in the cigar. And I'm like, okay, I want to be a part of this party. And as soon as I sit down, my uncle looks at the person he's talking to, and he's like, hey, I'm actually going to get going. I'm going to entertain I got a couple people at the house I'm going to entertain real quick. And he just turns over and just starts talking, and we just have this wonderful conversation. And it was just kind of wonderful. My uncle's just this real interesting, really, really awesome dude who I'm sure we will stay with if we go back to Lake Charles soon. So, yeah.
Abby, land us with a moment where you really saw God's involvement in this trip.
Thank you for repeating that through all the what was the original question? So just a moment I saw God working.
Yeah.
All the ones I was going to originally say were taken, because I was going to say just how crazy like the provision was, and how like we got beautiful homes that had each separate bedrooms to stay in, and like we didn't have to sleep on the ground or in trucks or in sleeping bags or anything like that.
Oh, Pepe's, Abby.
Oh yeah, cafes. Yeah, the fact that Mission paid for all of our food and we got to have like amazing, delicious local food was really awesome. Because like, not going too deep into it, but like financial was definitely a worry of mine, because I didn't really think too much of the trip. I was just like, you know what? God's gonna make the time. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna help in any way I can. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna pay for food or things like that. But the fact that like Mission paid for that, and I was able to have like the best burger of my life, amazing.
Which we learned about Abby, that potentially every meal she has might be the best meal of her life, which is really encouraging to hear about.
I've decided Abby's just the most delightful, like animated. We had a joke that every burger she had was the new best burger she'd ever had, because she just ate with so much joy and passion. There was one moment where we were cutting limbs off these gigantic trees that had fallen into a pastor's yard. We were dragging limbs out, and of course it's Louisiana. It's swampy. It's hot. It's really humid. And I'm walking back to the yard while Abby's got this giant tree branch she's dragging behind her. And she just looks at me and she's like, did you feel that breeze just now? That was amazing. Oh my gosh. Everything just fills her heart with gladness. And I was catching it too. It was great. So
this had to do with how great the team was, because we had like Abby's positivity, Derek's like excitement to do work and play techno,
and his chainsaw capabilities.
Yeah, chainsaw capabilities. We had Tabitha's just kind of like steady persistence. We had John being like, I don't know if we should do that at some really key moments, and but also being like our relational connector there. It was pretty sweet. Really cool to see. Hey, I'm gonna try this. I've never done this on a video, but just share a couple of photos on the old screen share here.
Okay.
Yeah, and So this is the church in Houston that we visited. This was John's family church in Lake Charles, and so
Messiah Baptist.
Messiah Missionary Baptist, and you could see the hurricane broke off these like awnings on the side, and the roof has been kind of skim coated because it had a lot of damage to it as well. And roofing companies were going around putting this plastic over them. This side over here to the right that's starting to fall is like going to fall if it hasn't already. It's close, but there's a lot of damage there. This is one of John's family homes. It's got this cross that says "All is well," which people had put in front of homes, so they knew everybody was okay inside. And you could see roof damage up here. So Derek and I had a little rooftop party in which we tarped and sealed up this roof. Here's a house where just the top was just kind of lifted off, and it wasn't really clear where the top of this house was. So that was some of the kind of damage you'd see. Here was a store downtown, or did we hear this was like a gym downtown?
Yeah.
It had really, really severe, like a brick wall, part of like the roof had all come in and brought part of the brick wall, and it's just destroyed. Here was me realizing maybe the saw was too small to really finish off this tree. Let's see, I feel like there's Derek with a slightly bigger saw, and
ladder fell. And he literally took 3 more steps on the tree with the chainsaw to keep going.
Yep, and undeterred, I think is the phrase. There, we made a lot of progress. We hacked the tree back that far. This is like these big trees. This is Derek. We could have all sat in that hole and had lunch, like legit. These things were huge. There's John and Uncle Walter and Aunt Sherry, which is a fun moment. Tabitha allowed us to buy her or pick out a mask for her, and so this was the one I chose. That's about the most intense American eagle, and if you'll note it, you can't see on this side, but in one of its talons it has the world, and I don't really know what exactly that might mean, but it's pretty intense. And then in the other side, the eagle in its talons has coronavirus. So politically, who knows what that means, but it was a pretty cool mask to make Tabitha wear. She promised she'd wear it all day if I picked it out for her. And then this was my birthday celebration. Thank you all for the pie. And Derek had a birthday before, and he's got a big sticker on his face, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, the beer lager sticker.
Yes,
that's a good sticker and a good beer.
That was a good sticker. And this beer was from a town we got to pass through. It was just a cool little bonus for me, which is where a lot of my family is from. That we didn't even know I didn't know we were going to pass through it. And then here's the house we got to stay at in El Paso, which was again like last second provision. That was really, really great. So, there you go. Little slideshow for you.
Nice. Andy, can you share some of those photos on our Facebook group where we've been sharing all these pictures?
I can. And Abby has a lot more photos than I do.
I have so many. I gave them all in Messenger.
Okay. Yeah.
She did. I'll
try to dump some photos there too.
So anyway, all that to say, it was fun to be on the trip with you all. And I just want to thank our church for the prayers and support, and even just to know that, it was cool to see how that church in Houston came along and supported, just knowing that we were able to do this because people have been generous, and our Deacon Fund had some funds in it, and we knew we didn't really have to worry. We could just go. And people even reached out and said, look, if that doesn't cover it, we'll cover it. And so we just had an extra layer of knowledge that we could just do what we needed to do. And so thank you all for your support, and thank you four and me for being down for a last second party trip. But really like also caring so deeply for the situation and John's family. And I just think God made some really cool connections for us. And we believe from what we've heard that we're going to be able to do some follow-up with a group called World Renew, who's going to do some long-term help there, who we've already talked to. So
Yes.
there will be long-term help, and we probably will get to participate with that as well. So,
and also just thank you to everyone who was praying for us. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the GoFundMe that we shared on our social media, because that was a huge blessing. We were able to impart to the church that we were helping. Thank you to New Life, CRC, and just to people who helped get in touch with those who could help us. Like, it was honestly, I couldn't see the trip going much smoother. And it was a huge blessing, and we're grateful for everyone who helped in even a little way. So,
yep. Any other thoughts?
I had a thought that you don't know if an event is going to be life-changing until, sorry, there's a plane, until maybe years later, but I could definitely see this trip changing trajectories or making connections or just impacting lives upon lives further down. So I guess my encouragement, if anyone else sees a trip like this, jump in if you can, because it's wonderful.
Yeah. Derek and Abby, parting
I
thoughts?
was gonna say something for people who may be wondering if Lake Charles doesn't have other people coming to help them. I heard from other churches, like Aspire Church said that they have 3 different organizations or ministries that they're sending people out to or donating to. And then I heard from Phoenix, there's a bunch of other organizations and things, and people are getting help more than 5 people can do in 4 days. So
yeah, and the need is massive. I mean, this whole town is really, really sustained a lot of damage, and so it's a huge need. It's going to be, I think World Renew talked about somewhere between a 5 and 10 year timeline that they're going to engage. So, in a way it was like, I view those trees as like a metaphor for the trip. We didn't know how big those trees were. I honestly, we looked in the pastor's backyard and it was like, oh, a tree fell down. And we started just chipping away at it. And then we got through some of the canopy and I realized, oh, these trees go on for these are huge, and we're not going to get anywhere near cutting up these trees. There's no chance. We don't have a big enough saw. We don't have enough days. There's no way. But the pastor still really appreciated that we came and got part of his yard cleared out and cared about him. And I think that's kind of a metaphor for the trip. We hardly put a dent in the need, but it was still a really important dent. It was a really important thing to be present and to be a part of it. And I think people really appreciated it. So all of you who supported us, there's a lot more left to do, but the dent that we made, I think, was really important. And we thank you for helping with that. So, all right, Derek, any more? I saw 2 good thumbs. Any other thoughts?
I liked the whole trip. It brought revitalization. It was very good perspective.
Yeah. As there's always what happens in the lives of the people you serve, what happens in your life as a community, our life as people who are on the trip. There are a lot of cool things that happened, and so gratitude all around. Well, thank you all for taking the time to record this, and thank you to everybody who watched and supported us along the way. And feel free to talk to us more about it later. We have a lot more stories, so we'd love to chat.
Bye.
Thank you, Andy.